From declaring war on bodies of water to refusing to acknowledge gravity, these are history's most spectacularly unhinged kings and queens. Number 5. Caligula, the emperor who declared war on the sea. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known by his childhood nickname Caligula, meaning little boots, ruled the Roman Empire from 37 to 41 CE, and packed more madness into his brief 4-year reign than most monarchs managed in decades. Initially popular when he ascended to the throne at age 24, Caligula's mental state rapidly deteriorated after a severe illness in the first year of his reign. What followed was a descent into tyranny and bizarre behavior that has fascinated historians for centuries. Among his most infamous acts was declaring war on Neptune, the god of the sea. During military campaigns in Germania, Caligula allegedly led his troops to the English Channel and ordered them to stab the water with their swords and collect seashells as spoils of war. This wasn't merely an eccentric moment, but part of a pattern of increasingly erratic behavior. Caligula appointed his favorite horse, Incitatus, as a priest, and allegedly planned to make him a consul, though modern historians debate whether this was actually done to mock the Senate. He declared himself a living god, appeared in public dressed as various deities, and demanded to be worshipped as such. His ruthlessness matched his delusions. He forced families to witness the harsh punishment of their loved ones, and reportedly found amusement in the suffering of others during royal banquets. At gladiatorial games, when there weren't enough combatants to fight the beasts, he arbitrarily ordered spectators from the crowd to be sent into the arena instead. He allegedly turned parts of the imperial palace into a venue for illicit activities, and routinely humiliated high-ranking officials by sleeping with their wives and then bragging about it publicly. By 41 CE, the Roman Senate had enough, and Caligula was assassinated by the Praetorian Guard in a conspiracy involving several senators. His body was partially cremated and buried in a shallow grave, and the Senate attempted to erase his legacy by melting down his statues. While some modern historians argue that ancient accounts of Caligula's madness were exaggerated by his enemies after his death, even the most conservative interpretations suggest a ruler whose grip on reality was tenuous at best. Number 4. King Charles VI of France, the king who thought he was made of glass. Charles VI of France, who ruled from 1380 to 1422, started his reign promisingly enough as Charles the Beloved. By the end, he was better known as Charles the Mad, suffering from one of history's most documented cases of royal insanity. Charles's mental breakdown began dramatically in 1392 when, during a military expedition, he suddenly drew his sword and attacked his own knights, killing several before being restrained. After this episode, he fell into a coma for several days. When he recovered physically, his mind was never the same. His most famous delusion was his persistent belief that he was made of glass. This glass delusion led Charles to refuse to let people touch him for fear he would shatter. He reportedly had iron rods sewn into his clothes to prevent himself from breaking if he fell, and he refused to sit down for long periods, fearing his glass buttocks would shatter. During episodes of his illness, Charles would refuse to bathe or change clothes for months at a time, fail to recognize his wife and children, run wildly through the palace halls until exhausted, deny his own identity, claiming he was someone else named George, sit motionless for hours, unresponsive to any stimuli. The king's episodes typically lasted several months before he experienced periods of lucidity, during which he could resume some governance duties. This cycling between madness and clarity made the situation particularly difficult for the French government, as it was never clear when decisions made by the king were legitimate. Charles's mental illness had catastrophic consequences for France. During his periods of incapacity, rival factions of Burgundians and Armagnacs fought for control, effectively plunging the country into civil war. This internal conflict, combined with the king's instability, made France vulnerable to English invasion, leading to disastrous defeats like Agincourt in 1415. The Treaty of Troyes, signed during one of Charles's more lucid moments in 1420, disinherited his own son in favor of Henry V of England as his successor, a decision that would have ended France as an independent kingdom had both Henry and Charles not died unexpectedly within months of each other in 1422. Modern medical historians have suggested Charles may have suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or porphyria, though a definitive diagnosis remains impossible. Whatever the cause, his mental illness fundamentally altered the course of European history, contributing to the prolongation of the 100 Years' War and nearly ending the French monarchy. Number 3. Empress Anna of Russia, the royal who built a palace of ice. Anna Ivanovna, Empress of Russia from 1730 to 1740, combined cruelty with a bizarre sense of humor that made her one of history's more disturbing monarchs. The niece of Peter the Great, Anna had spent years in exile in Courland, modern-day Latvia, before being invited to take the Russian throne. Once in power, she seemed determined to punish the Russian nobility for her earlier humiliations. Anna's reign was characterized by excessive taxation, a bloated court filled with her German favorites, and a secret police that terrorized the aristocracy. However, it was her peculiar entertainment that earned her lasting infamy. The Empress had a particular fondness for dwarfs, keeping up to 100 at court and forcing them to serve as jesters. She arranged dwarf weddings inside giant pies, from which they would emerge to the amusement of courtiers. On one occasion, she housed her collection of human oddities in a giant human nest, requiring them to sit on eggs and cluck like chickens for her entertainment. Her most shocking spectacle came in 1740. After discovering that one of her jesters, a former prince named Mikhail Golitsyn, had converted to Catholicism, considered a grave offense, Anna forced him to become her new court fool, with the title Prince of the Moon. As punishment, she arranged his marriage to one of her elderly servants, a woman known as the Hunchback. For this mockery of a wedding, Anna commissioned a full-scale palace made entirely of ice on the frozen Nieva River. The structure was architecturally sound, with ice furniture, ice sculptures, and even ice cannons that could actually fire. After the ceremony, the newlyweds were placed in the freezing palace and deprived of warm clothing, left overnight as guards stood watch to prevent escape. Miraculously, the couple survived the night, though both suffered severe health consequences. Anna's sadistic streak wasn't limited to this single incident. She regularly humiliated nobles by forcing them to cluck like chickens, roll eggs across the floor, or sit in vast pies dressed as birds. She kept a special chamber near her bedroom, where she personally interrogated political prisoners. The Empress died in 1740, at age 47, likely from kidney disease. Her ice palace melted with the spring thaw, but the account of her cruelty has preserved her reputation as one of Russia's most mentally unbalanced rulers, a woman whose personal traumas transformed into public spectacles of humiliation for others. Number 2, Queen Joanna of Castile, the queen who wouldn't let her husband go. Joanna of Castile, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, and mother of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, earned her unfortunate nickname, Joanna the Mad, due to her obsessive refusal to part with her husband's corpse. Joanna's mental state appeared reasonably stable during her youth, though contemporaries noted her intense emotional reactions and religious outbursts. Her deterioration began after her marriage to Philip the Handsome of Habsburg, whom she loved with an obsessive intensity that bordered on pathological. Philip's frequent infidelities drove Joanna to fits of jealousy, during which she would attack his mistresses and refuse food and sleep. When Philip died suddenly, in 1506, of typhoid fever, Joanna was inconsolable. Rather than allow his body to be buried, she insisted on keeping his coffin with her at all times. According to contemporary accounts, she ordered the casket to be opened regularly to ensure he was still there, treating him with the same affection she had shown him in life. During the funeral procession to Granada, she refused to travel during the day or allow women near the coffin, fearing that female mourners might try to seduce her husband. The procession would only travel at night, and Joanna insisted on stopping at monasteries rather than castles or palaces, as she believed her husband's soul would benefit from proximity to holy sites. When forced to stay at an inn with a reputation for housing women of ill repute, she allegedly had Philip's coffin placed in a nearby field to protect his remains from temptation. Though technically Queen Regnant of Castile after Isabella's death, Joanna's mental state made it impossible for her to rule effectively. Her father Ferdinand initially served as regent, followed by her son Charles. In 1509, she was confined to the royal monastery of Santa Clara in Tordesillas, where she remained for 46 years until her death in 1555. During this confinement, she was frequently reported to be in states of religious ecstasy or deep depression. Modern historians debate whether Joanna truly suffered from mental illness or was the victim of political manipulation by the men in her family who wished to rule in her stead. Some suggest she may have had schizophrenia or a form of bipolar disorder, while others point to postpartum psychosis after her 6 pregnancies, or trauma from emotional abuse by her unfaithful husband. Regardless of the true nature of her condition, Joanna's inability to separate from her husband's remains and her willingness to talk to his corpse as if he were still alive made her one of history's most tragically disturbed monarchs. Number 1. King Zhu Houcong, the emperor who refused to touch the ground. Zhu Houcong, the Jiajing emperor of China's Ming dynasty, ruled from 1521 to 1567 and distinguished himself as one of the most eccentric and difficult monarchs in Chinese history. Unlike some rulers whose madness manifested as violence, the Jiajing emperor's peculiarities centered around his obsession with Taoist immortality practices and his refusal to fulfill basic imperial duties. Upon ascending the throne at age 14, Zhu Houcong immediately created controversy by refusing to perform the traditional mourning rituals for his predecessor, arguing that as a cousin rather than a direct descendant, he shouldn't have to honor the former emperor as a father. This great ritual controversy divided the court and established Jiajing's reputation for stubborn defiance of tradition when it didn't suit him. As he aged, the emperor became increasingly obsessed with achieving immortality through Taoist practices. He employed hundreds of Taoist priests and alchemists who concocted elixirs containing mercury, lead, and other toxic substances, ironically, likely accelerating his deterioration rather than extending his life. The most bizarre manifestation of his delusions was his belief that he should not allow his feet to touch the ground. Court records indicate that in the later years of his reign, the Jiajing emperor refused to walk on the palace floors, instead being carried everywhere by eunuchs. He reportedly believed that contact with the earth would drain his accumulated spiritual energy and prevent him from achieving transcendence. When forced to move through the palace independently, he would have special elevated platforms constructed, so his feet remained elevated above the ground. These pathways created logistical nightmares for palace staff and required constant maintenance, draining the imperial treasury. The emperor's pursuit of immortality extended to his bedchambers. Believing that being surrounded by the vitality of youth would extend his own time on Earth, he maintained a large number of consorts within the palace. According to court records, these women were held to strict regimens and forced to consume specific diets believed to enhance their spiritual properties. In 1542, a group of consorts attempted to strangle him with a silk scarf as he slept. The assassination attempt failed, and the women and their families were met with the harshest penalties of the era. However, the emperor never fully recovered, physically or mentally, from this trauma, becoming even more reclusive and paranoid. For the last 20 years of his 45-year reign, the Jiajing emperor effectively abandoned governance altogether, retreating to specially constructed Taoist temples within the Forbidden City. He communicated with ministers only through written notes, sometimes going months without direct interaction with government officials. When he finally died in 1567 at age 59, likely from mercury poisoning from his immortality elixirs, the empire he left behind was corrupt, faction-ridden, and vulnerable to the external threats that would eventually bring down the Ming dynasty. His refusal to touch the ground might seem merely eccentric, but it symbolized a broader disconnection from reality that had real consequences for millions of his subjects. Thanks for watching. I like random and strange history. Subscribe if you do too.